Yo, what's up everybody? It's Manga Mike here, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about atmospheric perspective. I'll be going over some of the basics, and I also talk to you about why it's important to think about while you're doing your comic or your manga. Alright, let's begin. Alright everybody, so I'm going to first start off with a quick definition of what atmospheric perspective is, and then I'm going to show you by color picking. So these photos are photos that I myself took while I was studying abroad, and I think that they do a really good job of kind of exemplifying what atmospheric perspective is. So this is how we're going to learn in this particular video. So atmospheric perspective is the theory that as we go back into space, into a photo, or just in general in real life, as we look further in the distance, things get increasingly more blue. The reason for that is because as things get further away from us, there's more air between us and those things. So there's more dust particles, there's more oxygen and carbon dioxide molecules and things like that. So there's more stuff getting in the way of us and that particular object. So for instance, if you don't believe me, I can show you. I'm going to color pick right here. So trees are green, newsflash. But I'm going to brighten this up. I'm doing this on purpose just to show you something. So yes, this is very, very green. Now let's look at these trees in the background. And I'm going to brighten this up. So why is that blue? It's because of what I just talked about, right? This should be enough to kind of prove that point to you, that as things go back in space, they get disrupted from our view. So it's not going to be exactly as if we were standing directly in front of it. So that's the first thing. So let's erase this and go to point number 2. I think most people understand this in general, and that is the closer objects are to us, the darker that they're going to appear overall. So I like this particular image because of these trees, and I'll show you why. So we get this tree up front. These trees I think they might not be, but I'm pretty sure they're the same species of tree. This is why I like this photo. So we get this color in the middle of the tree, which is like almost pure black, right? And then we get this color in a tree that's probably only about 30 feet, or maybe a little bit more, maybe like 30 yards or 40 yards or something behind the tree that I first color picked from. And now I'm gonna zoom in and I'm gonna pick from this one. This is actually pretty dark still, but it's still not as dark as that front tree, right? And if I wanted to really pick from it, from a spot, I would probably pick like right in here, just to kind of exemplify it. It gets even brighter, right? So, because if I wanted to pick like the brightest spot on this tree, it would probably be here. And it's still darker than the brighter spot on the back tree. So, why is that? Well, that's because of the same thing that we were just talking about with the atmospheric perspective, is that it gets distorted. Things are in our way. So, as something gets further away from us, it's not going to appear as dark. So, let's get to our next point. Closer things are also brighter. So how does that make sense? Alright, so this is something I think people don't necessarily understand, and it's extraordinarily important in your artwork. So atmospheric perspective doesn't just mess with the darkness of something, right? It also messes with the brightness. It messes with the values overall, and it kind of also messes with the saturation of objects in general as they go off into the distance. So let me kind of show you. I like this particular image for this example for 2 reasons. So let me go through the brightness test. So the brightest point that's natural in the foreground on this image is right here. Oops. Which is very close to like pure white, right? And this, I think this is metal, but we can even still use it as an example. You see, that's probably the brightest point back here versus the brightest point up here. And it's not close, right? This is almost pure white, and this is bright, but it's still not quite as bright. Now, let me use a non-metallic object that's in the background. Now, I will say specular stuff on the ocean, that's different. This is acting as a mirror. This isn't quite the same because this is very much pure white, but this is basically a whole bunch of mirrors on the water. So let me think. The brightest point is probably here, or one of the brightest points. Look at the difference, right? So that's something that you want to think about as you're drawing. So why was this point and the previous point so important? So besides helping yourself with depth, it also gives you information on how you can do your line art, how you can do your grayscale like we've already talked about, the amount of details that are in something, because as you can see, you lose detail too because of the atmospheric perspective as it goes back. Here you can see leaves, here not so much, and back here you just kind of see these blobs, right? So that's another thing to keep in mind with perspective in general, but also atmospheric perspective. So all of those things are going to kind of combine together to make your pieces look whole. All right, so that's why it's so important. Even like for instance, for line art, you can use black line art for the things in the foreground, and then as you go into the midground, you can maybe use a dark gray, but not quite a black. And then as you get even closer to the background, you might want to go between like a 3/4 to a mid-tone gray for the line work, right? So that's something that you can keep in mind. All right. So I don't have one like an example to really drive this one home because I don't have a sunset photo, but time of day also is going to impact atmospheric perspective. When the sun is setting, things are going to appear a little bit more orange than they do blue. Even here, like there's this haze that's happening right here because this is almost a sunrise, but there's this like haze that's happening. It's still blue, but as you can see, it's more of a washed out blue rather than the blues that we were getting before. So let me see here. So here, I mean, granted, it's 2 different things and it's a little further away, but in the first photo or the last photo that I was showing, but you can see the difference. The saturation is different, and that I think has to do with the time of day that these 2 pictures were taken. And why is that important? Well, if you want to do something that's like a sunset or something of that nature, like on your scene, or you're trying to show that, that transition in time of day, and it's going from daylight to nighttime, for instance, you might want to think, if you're doing your manga in color, you might want to think about that as a way to kind of really indicate it. Like things are more orange around us. Even in the distance, it's slightly less saturated with blue. Rather, it's a little bit more of a mid-tone blue. So yeah, I really do hope that this was helpful, and hopefully this is going to help propel your artwork to being even greater. So again, just to recap, the way that this is a helpful tool for you is that it's going to impact your line art, your overall colors, your sense of just the sense of depth within your piece. If you're doing screen toning, it's going to impact that as well. Like the stuff that's closer to us is going to have a tighter grit of screen tone, and then when you kind of wash some of it away to show bright spots, you're gonna maybe use a hard eraser rather than a soft eraser to do some of that in order to get that specular activity that you would get in the foreground. And then for something very similar in the background, you might do a little bit more of a washed look by using like a softer brush to kind of edge away at some of that screen tone. Same thing is true of grayscale and of overall values and saturation as well. I'm going to go back to this photo really fast and kind of do this saturation test. I want you to see how much things jump around in the color wheel as I go back. Watch, in the foreground it's jumping like crazy. It's all over the place, up and down, different colors. And then we get into this like mid-ground, and yeah, it's jumping, but not as much. It's jumping very subtly. And then we get into this background, and as you can see, it almost stays in the same exact spot, right? So that's your saturation right there, and just the overall contrast. So think about that as well, right? It's really important. Things that are closer to the screen are going to have more of a pop of color than things that are further away. Alright everybody, I really do hope that this was helpful. Hopefully for those of you who are new to atmospheric perspective, this was a good introduction to it. Do some more research. There's a whole bunch of great videos out on it. Keep watching this video over and over again if you don't quite understand the overall concept. But, yep, I'm Manga Mike, and I'm out.